ticks slow, the moon hangs low, the stars they whisper where you might go. I light a candle, watch it glow. I'm waiting at the window, waiting for you. The night is long, the heart is true. Oh, darling, come home soon.
There's a particular ache that comes from realizing you've fallen for the same type of person. Again, the charming ones, the magnetic ones, the ones who seem to read your soul like a book and then slowly erase it. The irony, the more they devalue you, the more you crave their approval. The more they withdraw, the more you chase. It's not love, it's a haunting. And deep down, you know it. But here's the paradox no one dares to say out loud. What if the very people who hurt you the most feel the most like home? What if the chaos of a toxic relationship doesn't repel you but comforts you? What if the anxiety, the emotional roller coasters, the walking on eggshells isn't unfamiliar, but deeply familiar, not because it's healthy, but because it's what your nervous system was trained to expect? And love, as you've come to know it, means suffering dressed in charisma. Is it possible that you're not unlucky in love, but addicted to a pattern that feels like destiny? You may have told yourself, this time it's different. You may have believed that the intense connection was real, that the passion was proof, that the red flags were just misunderstandings. But somehow, you always end up in the same emotional crater: self-doubt, isolation, emotional whiplash. You question your worth. You replay conversations at night like a broken reel. You wonder if you're just too sensitive, too needy, too much. But what if it's not about being too much, but about being wired to chase the ones who give you too little? You might wonder, why do I ignore the kind ones? Why does healthy love feel boring? Why does safety make me restless while chaos feels alive? Why do I keep making excuses for someone who wouldn't make the smallest effort for me? Why do I keep handing out loyalty like candy to people who treat it like trash? And here's the hardest truth of all. You can consciously know someone is bad for you and still feel drawn to them like gravity. It's not stupidity. It's not weakness. It's something deeper, something ancient inside you that craves not love itself, but a distorted version of it. One you've mistaken for truth. Because here's the dark mirror we rarely want to face. The toxic person is only half the equation. The other half is you, not your fault, but your blueprint. What if you've been trained, subtly and silently, to confuse inconsistency with passion, to mistake control for protection, to believe that love means earning it, rather than being offered it freely? What if you are not broken but programmed? And if so, who wrote the code? Was it a parent who only gave affection when you performed perfectly? Was it a caretaker whose love came with conditions? Was it a world that taught you to abandon yourself for crumbs of validation? You see, the greatest trick of a toxic bond is this. It doesn't just trap you in the other person. It traps you in yourself, in a self that was never truly yours to begin with. So, before you ask why you keep falling for the wrong people, ask a more dangerous question. Who taught you that this was love? Because unless you answer that question, the cycle doesn't end. It just repeats, wearing a different face. And yet, if you're reading this, if your stomach is in knots, if your mind is replaying moments you thought you buried, then something in you already knows. You're not asleep. You're waking up. But waking up is only the beginning. Because what you're about to uncover isn't just about relationships, it's about your psyche, your survival instincts, your soul's map. You're not just drawn to toxic people, you're magnetized to the unresolved. And until you see it, name it, and unravel it, you'll keep mistaking your trauma for a love story. So let's go deeper. Not into them, but into you. Because behind every toxic relationship is a deeper, invisible force that shapes your choices, blinds your judgment, and sabotages your healing before it even begins. Are you ready to confront it?
Blues pouring down like rain, heart full of ache and pain. Everything's gone wrong, but I'll stay strong. Every road feels so tough, times are getting real rough. Don't know how to cope, but I still hope. I'll keep on trying, even when I'm crying. Life knocks me down, I won't stay on the ground.
There is a moment after the heartbreak and the confusion when you stop blaming them and start questioning yourself. But this questioning doesn't lead to clarity, it spirals. Why did I stay? Why did I let it happen again? Why do I keep trusting people who end up tearing me apart from the inside out? Most never reach this moment. They just jump from one partner to the next, hoping that a new face will mean a new fate. But if you've landed here, if you're beginning to suspect that the common denominator in all this pain is you, it means you're ready to face something most people never do. The truth is, you're not addicted to toxic people. You're addicted to what they represent. They are mirrors of something familiar, something that burrowed itself into you before you ever had a choice. And to understand this pattern, you have to understand the origin of your emotional blueprint. Imagine a child raised in a home where love was inconsistent, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, always conditional. A parent who praised you one day and withdrew the next. You never knew what you would get, so you learned to scan their mood like weather patterns. You learned that love was something you earned, not something you were worthy of simply because you existed in that unpredictable environment. Your nervous system didn't just adapt, it memorized. Chaos became normal. Emotional whiplash became routine. Hypervigilance became your compass. So later in life, when someone replicates that familiar unpredictability, it doesn't feel wrong, it feels like home. Your body recognizes the pattern. Your mind, confused by the contradiction, calls it chemistry. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That is exactly what happens in toxic relationships. You are not choosing them because you're foolish, you're choosing them because they fit a script that was handed to you long ago. You keep casting the same character in a different costume, hoping this time the ending will be different. But the ending never changes because the script hasn't. There's a deeper hunger beneath all of this. It's not just about love. It's about redemption. You are unconsciously seeking someone who wounds you in the same way you were first wounded, so that maybe this time you can heal it. It's not about attraction. It's about reenactment. This is not weakness. It is a deeply human mechanism. Nietzsche called this the eternal recurrence, the unconscious loop of repeating familiar pain, over and over, because it is the only thing we know how to hold. Trauma doesn't just wound us, it teaches us what love is supposed to feel like. And so you seek lovers who echo your first injuries, because some part of you believes that if you can just get it right this time, you'll finally be free. But here's the trap. Toxic people cannot heal wounds they replicate. They only deepen them the very moment you give them the power to redeem your past. You also give them the power to destroy your present. And yet, the pull is magnetic. Psychologically, it's called a trauma bonder connection forged through intermittent reinforcement, the cycle of reward and punishment. One moment they love you, the next they disappear. One day you're everything, the next, nothing. Your brain floods with cortisol, then dopamine, then back again. It's not just emotional, it's chemical. You become addicted to the high, then desperate to survive the crash, and slowly you begin to mistake the intensity for intimacy. But they are not the same. This is why good, safe people often feel dull. Your nervous system has been trained to associate danger with excitement. Calm feels suspicious. Kindness feels fake. When someone respects your boundaries, your brain doesn't recognize it as love, it sees it as indifference. That's not your fault. That's your programming. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that most of our suffering comes from misplaced desire, longing for things that were never meant to satisfy us. In love, that misplaced desire often leads us toward the ones who reflect our deepest fractures, not because we want to hurt, but because we want to heal through them. And so, we unconsciously seek out people who will hurt us in familiar ways, just to reenact the story we never finished writing. But here's the hidden tragedy. When we tether our healing to someone else's behavior, we remain prisoners, especially when that someone was never capable of love in the first place. Our society doesn't help either. We are romanticized into madness. We are told love should be intense, obsessive, all-consuming. We are taught that jealousy means passion, That drama means depth. That possession means value. Rarely do we hear that real love is boring in the best way. Stable, kind, consistent. The kind of love that lets your nervous system breathe. Instead, we chase shadows. We mistake the thrill of being needed for the safety of being cherished. And we end up losing ourselves in the effort to keep people who were never meant to be kept. What you must understand is this: falling for toxic people isn't just a personal failure. It's a psychological inheritance, a spiritual repetition, a societal illusion, and a philosophical riddle. Why do we seek liberation in the very places we lost ourselves? But now that you've begun to see the pattern, the question is no longer why it happened. The real question is, what now? Because awareness without action is just another form of suffering. You've glimpsed the programming. You felt the cost. But now comes the choice that will define everything. Do you go back to sleep, or do you begin the rebellion?
Strengthen my veins, I'll break these chains. Through static lines, no signal came, just warning signs. And all I got was light and sound. No trace of you was ever found.
There's a certain silence that follows every toxic relationship, the kind that doesn't feel like peace, but like a void. Not because they were good for you, but because they occupied every inch of your emotional bandwidth. Now that they're gone, what remains is not healing, but emptiness, an eerie stillness, as if your identity, once entangled with theirs, has been amputated and you're left trying to remember who you were before them. But the deeper consequence is even quieter. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It doesn't destroy in one dramatic blow. It corrodes slowly, subtly, like rust under paint. This is how the real damage of toxic love lives on. Not in the fights you remember, but in the parts of yourself you begin to mistrust. You start doubting your instincts, second-guessing your memory, questioning whether your pain was valid at all. After all, didn't they say you were too emotional, too needy, overreacting? Weren't you always the one apologizing? And even now, with distance between you, that voice lingers in your head like a parasite, whispering, maybe it really was your fault. That's not an accident. That's the invisible residue of psychological manipulation, often so subtle that it disguises itself as your own thoughts. It's called gaslighting. And it doesn't just distort reality, it shatters your compass when someone systematically causes you to question what you saw, what you felt, what you knew deep down. They don't just win arguments, they steal your sense of self. But that's just the beginning. Because once your self-trust erodes, you stop listening to your own needs. You begin outsourcing your worth. You shapeshift, people please, walk on eggshells in every relationship, terrified that the smallest misstep will make you unlovable. And slowly, you begin to play smaller in every area of life, not just romance. You shrink your voice, dull your shine, edit your truth to avoid rejection. You mistake approval for connection, and connection for survival. This isn't just an emotional pattern, it becomes a neurological one. From a neuroscientific lens, the brain adapts to chronic emotional volatility. When you're repeatedly exposed to highs and lows, your limbic system, the part responsible for emotional processing, begins to anticipate danger, even when it's not there. The result? Hypervigilance. You become an expert in detecting the moods of others, but a stranger to your own. Every smile is suspect. Every silence feels like punishment. You're always bracing for impact, even in safe relationships, especially in safe ones. Why? Because safety is unfamiliar, and the brain confuses unfamiliarity with threat. This is why, even after leaving a toxic partner, you might find yourself in similar dynamics again and again, not because you enjoy the pain, but because your nervous system has been calibrated to associate love with anxiety. You think you're looking for intimacy, but your body is looking for a chemical spike. You confuse chaos with passion, trauma with compatibility, intensity with meaning. Over time, this pattern becomes more than just a relational problem, it becomes a worldview. You begin to believe that love is supposed to hurt, that emotional safety is a myth, that you are difficult to love, that relationships are just cycles of hope and disappointment, and worst of all, that this is just the way it is. But that belief isn't truth, it's conditioning. Conditioning shaped by more than your past partners. It's reinforced by the culture around you. Look at media, the bad boy trope, the emotionally unavailable genius, the brooding narcissist. These characters are romanticized, glorified, painted as desirable. Meanwhile, healthy love is portrayed as dull, predictable, uninspiring. We don't just fall for toxic people, we're trained to dot, and so the cycle continues. You date someone who mirrors your wounds. You get caught in the loop of emotional scarcity. You lose yourself trying to earn love that should have been freely given. And when it ends, you blame yourself. You repeat the story, but each time, the cost grows, because the true consequence of toxic love is not just heartbreak, it's self-abandonment. Every time you ignore your gut, dismiss your pain, justify their cruelty, or lower your standards just to keep someone from leaving, you teach your soul that its truth doesn't matter. You make micro-compromises that seem small in the moment, but over time they erode your identity. You wake up one day unable to recognize yourself, not because someone changed you, but because you kept changing yourself for them. And then comes the final, most dangerous stage, numbness, when you've been burned too many times, when your trust has been weaponized against you, when love feels like a battlefield you stop feeling altogether. You tell yourself you don't care, that love is overrated, that it's safer to be alone. But underneath that armor is a heart that's not cynical, it's terrified. Because deep down, you still want to believe. You still long for connection, for presence, for someone who sees you and stays. But every toxic relationship teaches your nervous system to equate love with risk. And so you build walls instead of bridges. You ghost people who are good for you. You sabotage intimacy the moment it feels real. And worst of all, you stop trusting your capacity to love at all. So here's the unseen consequence that no one talks about. You don't just fall for toxic people. Over time, you become toxic to yourself, not out of malice, but out of defense, out of exhaustion, out of survival. And unless this cycle is interrupted, it becomes your reality, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. But what if it doesn't have to be? What if you could rewire your sense of love not by searching for the perfect person, but by finally reclaiming the parts of yourself you abandoned to be loved? What if healing doesn't start with finding someone new, but by becoming someone new? Someone who no longer sees love as a prize to earn, but as a truth to embody. That's the rebellion. And it begins the moment you stop running toward them and start turning inward.
No word to stay, just ghosts of things we didn't say.
The train crawled slowly through the dark. Its wheels kept chanting their slope song. Next crossroad slipped into the night. Dim lamps were swaying, lost in calm.
It hits you one day, not in some dramatic epiphany, but in a quiet, ordinary moment. Maybe you're doing the dishes. Maybe you're walking alone at dusk, and suddenly it lands not as a thought, but as a knowing. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. This realization doesn't just shake your history. It redefines your entire understanding of love, pain, and identity. Because for so long, you've been trying to solve a problem that was never yours. You've been twisting yourself into smaller and smaller shapes to fit into someone else's void, believing that love meant sacrificing yourself. But the ultimate truth, the one buried beneath every toxic entanglement, is this: you were never broken. You were reacting to a broken system. The people who couldn't love you weren't proof of your unworthiness. They were evidence of their own limitation. You see, toxic people don't choose you because you're weak. They choose you because you're strong enough to hold the weight of their chaos. Because you're empathetic, forgiving, deeply attuned. But when those traits are unguarded, when they come from a place of needing to be loved, rather than already knowing your worth, they become magnets for those who feed on that very light. This is where the paradox dissolves into clarity. The pain was never proof that love was real. It was proof that your body was trying to alert you over and over that something was wrong. But no one taught you how to listen. Because you were raised in a culture that glorifies suffering in the name of love, That tells you to fight for those who would never fight for you. That labels your intuition as insecurity and your boundaries as selfishness. You internalized these messages, and over time, they calcified into identity. You stopped trusting your own signals. You stopped asking what you needed, and you began building your life around people who kept you doubting your reality. But now you know, doubt is not a sign of love. It's a sign of misalignment. So what do you do with this truth? This heavy, holy understanding that you've been loyal to the wrong things. You begin again, but this time, not from the place of how can I be better, but from the place of who was I before I was taught to apologize for my needs. You strip away the roles, the survival tactics, the romantic delusions. You stop looking for someone to save you and become the architect of your own peace. And here's what you find at the center of that reconstruction. Yourself not as someone to be fixed, but as someone to be reclaimed. All those years you spent loving the wrong people, they weren't wasted. They were invitations. Each heartbreak carved out the space for a deeper knowing. Each betrayal pushed you closer to your truth. Each abandonment whispered, there is still more of you to return to. This is the real ending, not a clean break, not a cinematic goodbye, but a quiet resurrection. You no longer ache to be chosen, because you have chosen yourself. And in doing so, you see love differently. It's not urgency, it's presence. It's not being swept away, it's being grounded. It's not about fixing or proving or earning. It's about being witnessed in your fullness, without shrinking, without performing, without walking on emotional landmines. Just to earn a moment of warmth. And the moment you embody that love within, something mystical happens. The people you once craved start to lose their power. You no longer feel compelled to explain your worth to someone who refuses to see it. You no longer confuse distance with mystery or manipulation with depth. You see clearly, and in that clarity, you rise. You begin drawing new boundaries, not as walls to keep people out, but as sacred lines that keep your soul intact. You surround yourself with people who are consistent, honest, emotionally safe, not because you're settling, but because you've finally outgrown the addiction to chaos. You become allergic to the things that once held you captive, and not in a reactive way, but in a peaceful, embodied way. You walk away not because you're bitter, but because you're finally free. And freedom, you realize, isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's quiet, gentle, a soft glow in your chest, a stillness in your nervous system. Knowing that love doesn't require you to abandon yourself. That is the ultimate truth. And it changes everything. Because once you've tasted this kind of wholeness, you can never go back to hunger disguised as passion. You can never again pretend that red flags are fireworks. You can never again confuse being needed with being loved. Now you know. Now you see. And from here on, every choice you make comes from a different place, not fear, not craving, not old wounds clawing at old doors, but from sovereignty, from clarity, from the truth that your worth was never up for debate. You no longer chase, you magnetize. You no longer collapse. You stand rooted. You no longer ask, why do they keep hurting me? You ask, why did I keep abandoning myself to be loved? And then silence, peace, home, not in someone else's arms, but finally in your own.
In the night, she was so near, but quite afar. The silence held us in its hands. The moving world began to slow. The eyes just